On an average week, how much red meat do you consume?
3 times a week.
2 to 3 times a week.
Over 10 times.
Per week.
We may not realize it, but our diet has a huge impact on the environment in many different ways. Everything we eat can be traced back to some sort of environmental issue. The excessive packaging our food comes in, the emissions of the buses, planes, and boats that our food travels on to get to the supermarket, and the mass amounts of food wasted when people or stores throw it away.
As if all of this isn't enough, there's one more thing to consider. The type of diet you consume also has a huge positive or negative effect on the environment. When you decide whether you're going to be a vegetarian, vegan, pescatarian, or a meat lover, your decision greatly impacts the effect you have on the environment.
According to The Guardian, avoiding meat and dairy products is the single biggest way to reduce your environmental impact on the planet, according to the scientists behind the most comprehensive analysis to date of the damage farming does to the planet.
Riding your bike or walking to school, sorting your garbage, and turning off lights and water when you're not using them are all great ways to start reducing your impact. But in order to really make a difference, reducing the amount of meat you consume is a huge step in the right direction.
The meat industry doesn't just feed one environmental issue. It contributes to at least 3 issues which we will talk about today. And what we are speaking about doesn't even include the full story. One of the major issues that meat production entails is emissions of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases.
One major issue is the emissions that result from the raising of cattle and the production of meat. According to Scientific American, the output of methane from cattle is estimated to generate some 20% of overall U.S. methane emissions. If you account for the fact that methane is 25 times more potent than carbon dioxide, these numbers are not a good sign. But wait, it gets worse. Not only do grass-fed cattle release copious amounts of emissions from solely their flatulence, but the process of making just their feed massively contributes to the emissions of greenhouse gases as well. Not only that, but the grain used to feed these cattle could feed 3.5 billion people. Eliminating the middleman can save the planet from many unneeded emissions.
Growing livestock feed in the U.S. alone requires 167 million pounds of pesticides and 17 billion pounds of nitrogen fertilizer each year across some 149 million acres of cropland. The process of making feed emits greenhouse gases such as nitrous oxide, which is 300 times more potent than carbon dioxide. Now you may be thinking, could the alternatives really be that much better? To answer your question, yes. Even cutting down the amount of red meat you eat by a little can make a huge difference, so you can imagine the difference cutting meat out entirely can make. For example, one single grass-fed piece of steak emits 330 grams of carbon, which is the same as driving a car 3 miles, whereas replacing that steak with chicken emits only 52 grams. If eating fish, it's only 40 grams, vegetables only 14 grams, and lentils only 2 grams of carbon.
When you think about it that way, solving climate change doesn't seem too hard. All it takes is one simple switch on only one meal, and you're already bringing your emissions down to 1/6 of what they were for that meal. If everyone did that, imagine the difference we could make. Another issue is the extensive land use of the meat industry. Cattle are grazing animals, meaning they need lots of land to move around and eat. However, most land isn't a clear, grassy landscape in its natural state. You have to make it that way. Clearing through trees and forests is necessary to make room for cattle to graze.
It is no secret that meat consumption habits are causing an abundance of other environmental problems. For example, a 2009 study found that 4/5 of a deforestation across the Amazon rainforest can alone be attributed to cattle ranching. Brazil is the world's largest exporter of beef. It alone has 24 to 25 million hectares of the Amazon devoted to the production of soy, 80% of which ends up as animal feed.
In addition, the loss of wildlife areas to agriculture is the leading cause of the current mass extinction of wildlife. Research shows that without both meat and dairy consumption, global farmland can be reduced by more than 75%. That is an area equivalent to the US, China, the European Union, and Australia all combined.
With more exposure to information and research on this issue, many companies, NGOs, and governments have taken steps to conserve rainforests and buy only certified beef products. The NGO Aliança de Terra in Brazil works to reduce deforestation of the Amazon related to beef production by creating incentives for producers to maintain their forest reserves. And the Brazilian government has recently announced plans to reduce forest clearing of an area of about 5,500 square kilometers per year.
However, despite these efforts, deforestation of the Amazon due to cattle ranching is still continuing. Many companies still continue to buy significant volumes of beef knowingly from farms that are engaged in illegal deforestation.
In addition to deforestation and the emission impacts red meat production has, water usage is next on the list. A water footprint measures the amount of water utilized in the production or supply of goods and services. And you guessed it, red meat production has a huge footprint.
It estimates the green water footprint, which is the consumption of rainwater, the blue water footprint, which is the consumption of surface and groundwater, and the gray water footprint, which is the pollution of surface and groundwater. These added together have determined a global water footprint for beef,
which measures 15,400 meters cubed per ton as a global average. Changing your diet can massively contribute to reducing this significant number, as animal products generally have much larger water footprints than crop products. Even consuming other meats like lamb, pork, or chicken, which are 4,300 meters cubed per ton, creates much less of an impact.
The water impact of meat production is due to a variety of different factors. This footprint is determined from water used to make fertilizer, irrigation of pasture and crops, as well as drinking water for animals.
Now you might be thinking, what about rainfall? Surely a lot of water needs for meat production rely on precipitation, which is a natural occurrence and does not disrupt the environment. Areas with frequent rainfall do typically rely less on irrigation. However, in instances with little rain, it becomes problematic. Not to mention, natural phenomena like droughts can happen anywhere. For example, in May of 2014, over half of the United States was in some level of drought.
We have learned that the production and consumption of red meat has detrimental impacts on the environment. All this information can seem daunting, and you may be left wondering, what can you really do to help this issue? After all, what's having one Big Mac really going to do to our planet?
The key is to start small. Make minor changes in your diet, such as altering portion sizes or reducing your meat consumption from 4 to 2 times a week. Even only cutting meat out by small margins will have huge impacts on the environment. After all, reducing your meat and dairy products has been stated to be the best and biggest way for you to reduce your environmental impact.
Climate change is no longer a fictional phenomenon set to happen one day. It's here now, and it isn't going anywhere unless we make a difference. It is up to us to make the changes today for a better tomorrow.